By the beginning of the 16th century, the Renaissance had turned Rome into a glittering capital of Christendom. Gold shimmered on altars, relics drew pilgrims by thousands, and every stone seemed to promise salvation. But beneath the marble and incense, a storm was quietly forming. A young Augustinian monk from Saxony, Martin Luther, arrived on a mission from his monastery to settle an internal dispute. His visit would only last a few weeks, but he left Rome disillusioned, and in doing so, set the world on fire.
This behind me is the Scala Sancta, or the Sacred Stairs. The legend goes that Queen Helena, when she went to Jerusalem, she found 28 marble steps that led to the palace of Pilate. And when she found those steps, she got them transported and take them inside this church in Rome. Is there any archaeology in that? Probably not. So this is just all a legend or a story. What I'm going to tell you is not a story, it's actually a true event. In 510 and 511, somewhere in between, there was an Augustinian monk from Germany that came here, and his name was Martin Luther. He came in to debate the faith. He was actually a conservative Catholic. He also visited some of the famous sites in Rome, and he came to the Scala Sancta. You can only walk the stairs on your knees, and he walked each step, step by step. Legend says when he came on top of it, he says, "Is this even real?" The reason why he was doing it is to get indulgence, and that was to make his way out of purgatory much faster. And the church was also selling indulgences to build the Basilica of St. Peter, because the church that's right here was not enough for the Pope to have.
Luther arrived around 1510 on behalf of his Augustinian order. The holy stairs had long been a magnet for pilgrims. Each step was set to release a soul from purgatory. The marble groves worn by knees are still visible today. For a devout monk trained in obedience, this was the ultimate act of devotion. Yet, as he reached the top, legend records a moment of doubt. Who knows if it is so? That quiet question would echo louder than any prayer had uttered. Luther's climb ended in silence. But what he did not yet know was that the very forgiveness he sought on those steps had become Rome's great enterprise, sold to fund a dream of marble and glory.
This is the Piazza Navona. It's one of the many piazzas or many squares where people will be gathering, and there will be shops all around. There will be street performers. There were also restaurants. And this is where Luther will be walking through Rome when he was here, and he will be seeing clergymen. He will see them in church acting one way, and then he would see them here acting the other way, indulging in all the good that life can offer, kind of stir up some questions and some anger in him. And this is probably where he kind of had some of the thoughts he had after seeing Rome with his real eyes.
For a monk who lived by discipline and poverty, the contrast was unbearable. Priests mocked the Mass, bragged about their mistresses, and hurried through prayers to reach the next banquet. Rome, he later wrote, was a cesspool of iniquity. The city's grandeur masked moral decay. While Luther wandered the street, Michelangelo was stretched beneath the vault of the Sistine Chapel, painting the hand of God touching Adam, an image of divine perfection that cost a fortune. Pope Julius II, known as the Warrior Pope, commissioned the work while commanding armies and expanding the papal lands. This was the world Luther entered. Artistic genius, political power, and spiritual confusion. The church that preached humility now rivaled kings in wealth and power.
Behind me is the St. Peter's Basilica and St. Peter's Square, but when Luther came here in 1510, this was nothing here. There's only scaffolding and the original Basilica of St. Peter built by Constantine. Pope Julius II, after the fall of Constantinople in 1453, decided they needed a bigger basilica here, so they built a St. Peter's Basilica. They replaced Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. How they started building this is they used indulgences, so they were selling forgiveness of sins for money in order to fund the basilica behind me. When Luther saw this, he later wrote in his 86 thesis, why doesn't the Pope use his own money to build the basilica? And that is one of the questions that change everything.
Indulgences were official documents promising a reduction of punishment for sin, drawn from what the Church called the treasury of merit, the spiritual surplus of Christ and the saint. By the 1510 they have become business. Agents like John Tetzel toured Germany proclaiming, "As soon as the coin in the coffin rings, the soul from purgatory springs." The prophet followed here, to the projects rising behind me. Julius II and later Leo X turned the forgiveness of sins into the financial engine that built St. Peter's. That single question in Luther's Thesis 86, why the Pope did not use his own wealth, cut to the heart of papal authority. To Luther, salvation could not be purchased. Grace was a gift and not a transaction.
This is the Castle of Sant'Angelo. It was originally built as a Hadrian's Mausoleum, but later the Pope turned it into a castle. This is where Pope Julius actually used it as his refuge, and also he had his armory. So when Luther comes to Rome, he sees Pope Julius II more like a warrior pope, not as a humility pope like he was expected to be, more Christ-like. So that was something that he was struggling with. There's actually a bridge running all the way from Vatican into this fortress because the Pope was a military Pope. So when Luther comes to Rome, he's looking for Pope to be an example, Christ-like. And what he sees is he's a military Pope who is selling indulgences to build this beautiful church behind me, the St. Peter's Basilica. So later in his writing, Luther writes that Pope is not sitting on the throne of Christ, he's sitting on the throne of Satan because of how he was acting.
From these ramparts, Julius II launched campaigns against Bologna and Venice. The popes wore armor, minted coins with their faces, and ruled like princes. Nearby, Michelangelo's colossal statue of Moses waited for the Pope's tomb, depicted with horns, the result of mistranslation of the Hebrew word for radiant. To Luther, the image was prophetic, divine law twisted by human pride. Luther left Rome weary and heartsick. He came expecting the holy city of Peter and Paul. He departed believing it was the Babylon of Revelation. He later wrote that he wished Rome was destroyed, for its corruption had infected the faith itself. Back in Germany, teaching at Wittenberg, Luther turned from relics to scripture. The doubts born on the Scala Sancta matured into conviction. Righteousness was not earned, it was received by faith. 7 years later, in 1517, he posted his 95 Theses, an academic call for debate that ignited Europe. Painting press scattered his words across the border faster than any army could stop them. The Reformation had begun. The papacy eventually completed St. Peter's. Michelangelo finished the dome in 1590, an architectural marvel founded by the very indulgences Luther condemned. Yet the church itself would change. Councils, reform abuses, and new movements were born. What Luther saw in Rome exposed not just the corruption by humanity itself. Ambition and faith, beauty and hypocrisy intertwined. Today, pilgrims still climb the Scala Sancta on their knees. They whisper the same prayers Luther once did. But the question he asked at the top of those stairs, is this real, still lingers. I've stood here too, looking at the same marble, the same city. It forces you to wrestle with what faith truly means. Not a transaction, but a transformation. The Rome that broke Luther's heart also awakened his soul, and in that awakening, the modern world began.